Next, in the number 3 spot, as we know, is the minuet movement. But already in his first symphony, Beethoven does something way outside the box. It's as if he says, this minuet thing is getting pretty old. It is, after all, a new century. So he labels the third movement as a minuet, but he actually writes what has to be regarded as the first ever symphonic scherzo, a relatively new genre largely pioneered by, guess who? Haydn, which Beethoven had also been using in his piano sonatas and chamber music. Scherzo is the Italian word for joke, and it's usually light and playful music, often dance-like, since it will now take the place of the minuet as something of a time-out in the symphonic plan. The scherzo is often designed like a minuet with a central contrasting trio section, but the character is definitely less formal and less old world than the minuet. Actually, in his piano sonata, Opus 31, number 3, Beethoven would include both a scherzo and a minuet. So Beethoven's third movement, which he calls a minuet, is a whirlwind of motion and excitement, and it's built on a rising scale. And it begins in C major. Immediately within 4 very quick measures, it moves into the dominant key of G major, like so. And it's much faster than that, as you will hear. And in the next 4 measures, it climbs even higher and reasserts G major. So here it is now, the opening of this most unusual New Age minuet. And what in the world just happened there? You hear this abrupt change from C major to G major in the opening. Okay, but after that, the lightning-fast harmonic shifts, and the misplaced rhythms, and that sudden burst of volume, they destabilize the music, the harmony, the rhythm, the dynamics. So let's slow it down a bit and just examine what the man is doing here. Beethoven starts this second section in the dominant key of G major, here, yes? And he uses this chromatic note just a half step above G, A flat, which is something of a wailing effect, and it moves us into this, which repeats. But notice the agitated rhythm here. Then he compresses the phrase, and he magically ends up in a totally new key. So we've been thrust now into the key of D flat major, which on the keyboard is only a half step above C major, the shortest distance you can move physically on the keyboard. But D flat is about as far away as you could get from C in the traditional ways of moving from one key to another in music, or modulating as we call it. But there's nothing traditional going on here, and Beethoven is able to sequentially, by repeating and rather mysteriously, take us from D flat major, as you will hear, and it's very graceful at this moment. I'll play it slowly. And amazingly back into C major, and a rather thunderous recap of the opening, complete with its rising scale theme. So let's now back up. I want you to hear all of this. We're in D flat major. And here goes. And what was that about? This thing. Did you you catch that? It's like this wailing chromatic thing we heard a while back. Beethoven now uses this bizarre harmonic device that we refer to as a Neapolitan chord. Don't ask me why. But you take the basic major triad, C, you move it up a half step, again, D flat. So you have, and then it resolves like so. Yeah, so together you have. Then he follows it with a standard non-Neapolitan progression. And he quickly alternates them. Then he really throws us a curve by accenting the second note on each measure. But at Beethoven's rapid tempo, it is so disorienting. But now we get back to C major for our closing of this section, but the rhythm of the melody does this. It's missing the strong beat on every downbeat in every measure. The accompaniment is there. The accompaniment is very regular. 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Put them together, the melody is doing this. It's just, I can barely keep up with this. And it's amazing, all these jarring, irregular elements. Melody, harmony, rhythm, the breakneck speed at which they all happen. They're disruptive, they're disorienting, almost chaotic.
Wow. So I have many questions, and for you especially. So we talked about what was essential to Beethoven, right? And I think this movement just slapped us right in the face with it. It's just, yeah. I mean,
It did.
if we were doubting before in the second movement, oh, this is kind of like a little nod to Haydn, no longer. Right? This is just clearly a Beethoven thing with the Neapolitan chord, that wailing chromatic theme, the fact that this is just he displaces the rhythms, the beats, the foot-sandy. It's amazing. My question for you is, how do you teach your students to play this kind of music? Like, what is it? What is it that gives it its character? But also, how do you teach it so they understand this sort of jostling, this sort of mini bar fight that happens?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, students need to be technically prepared. You know, just a little comment from Larry, who is a fabulous pianist himself, saying, well, I'm barely keeping up with it. This is technically challenging.
Yes,
and
yes.
it's rhythmically disruptive and disorienting. So here's Beethoven, disruptor, disorienter, but you got to keep it under control, right?
Right.
So yeah, Beethoven in some ways is extremely technically demanding composer.
Yeah.
So let's just assume students are ready to execute. It's not so much about some kind of general readiness as a personality or all this big stuff. It's very much in the fingers and in the coordination and being able to really execute this. Now, let's say students develop enough tools and techniques in their fingers and in their technique to do that. Now, the character becomes the thing in there. And I usually start, and I myself feel that very strongly with Beethoven, in movements like this, and there's many movements in his sonatas like this, where he's turning something normal, like a minuet, into basically on its own head, into a real scherzo. Scherzo is a joke, translates as a joke, but he takes it as a opportunity to put things even grotesque in there. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So I have a keyword for my students, and I usually ask parents to don't participate in this part of the lesson, okay? Because it's going to be something outside the box. We're dealing with a composer who's outside the box, right? So I tell my students, well, do you have a little bit of a hooligan in you? And the students go like, oh, no, my mom is sitting here. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Then I say, well, your mom is sitting there, but I'm going to confess, I have a little bit of a hooligan in me. And how about we channel that hooligan instead of getting on mom's nerves and on
Right,
sister's
right.
toes into this fabulous music because it's written by someone who enjoys being a little hooligan
Right.
without harming anyone.
I see. I see.
So
I see.
that's where we start. And then we look for all those elements which make that music tick.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think what it is also in terms of the rhythm is you want to obviously you need to master it and find ways to master the coordination. A lot of it, what was difficult about it is the coordination of the accents and the dynamics and not rushing the preparation for these accents, not kind of like forgetting to do it and then doing it last minute so then you jolt the way you feel it. And last of all, I think what's really fun is once you get the coordination right, once you get the dynamics, once you've memorized it probably, it's really fun. It's about having fun with it. And the
That's
great
right.
orchestras, you use the great orchestras, whether it is, that infamous video of Leonard Bernstein conducting, that encore of a Haydn symphony just with his
That's right.
no hands, just with his facial expressions. That sort of fun, that sort of changes in character, that's the next, level.
Absolutely. That's the fun of it. And you're so right about planning to have fun with it so that you can actually have fun with it. And that goes back to Beethoven. He plans the effect. And obviously he has great fun working, with his toys, which is accents and rhythms and this and that and putting, I can almost envision him working around that symphony and going, oh, I'm going to just put this syncopated.
Yeah, what
accents
about
in
with
there.
that for right there and
Right
just place
there.
the rhythm there? Neapolitan, no Neapolitan. Now, how does that work?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So you got to, like you said, you got to get over the hump of being able to execute it where it doesn't become, a perpetual struggle with coordination.
Yeah.
And when you do, it's almost like flipping that switch and igniting the fire of joy and fun of that process. It's very game-like. And
Yeah.
I think if Beethoven was living today, he probably would have been very sought after game composer.
Yes. It would make it so good. You'd make it so you're so concentrated on the music itself, you forget that you're playing a game. It's that sort of composer. Well, I think sometimes it happens with these movies where you're so absorbed that the music makes it so much more absorbing and haunting, perhaps. And I also like to think that plays such a big role in our emotional state. But yeah, I just want to start with saying that, anything that you thought, oh, maybe that's a bit of a hint to Haydn, or that's not really fully Beethoven, that's completely changed when you get to the third movement. It's this immediate change that happens. When you hear this, I see it's so easy to start dancing to it. I can imagine what the first people who heard this would have felt.
That's right. Well, he labeled it minuet. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
you
true.
can dance. You can jump to it, but I don't
Yeah.
think you can really dance the
No,
minuet.
no.
But the dancey element is at the core of it, definitely. And Beethoven's sense of dance is much broader than some kind of prescribed dance movements. And I found that he tackled a lot with what I would call wild dance. Like if you go to the high school dance party, a couple of hours after it started,
Oh, I see.
it's that kind of a dance where everyone got their heart pumping already quite a bit.
They're warmed up. They're warmed up.
Warmed
They're
up.
past the awkward stage.
They pass the awkward stage, and then you walk right into that, and you feel like, oh, I'm allowed to just stomp and wiggle whatever way I want.
Do whatever I want.
to the music.
Yeah.
So it's that sense of freedom, and on the border of wild, but with Beethoven, it becomes really organized wilderness.
It's just, I can barely keep up with this. And it's amazing, all these jarring, irregular elements. Melody, harmony, rhythm, the breakneck speed at which they all happen. They're disruptive, they're disorienting, almost chaotic. Yet Beethoven organizes it all with supreme skill and architectural logic. This is just a totally new way of writing music, which requires a new way of listening. It was impossible in 1800 for the human ear to follow and make sense of this lightning-quick, volatile music. Here it is again. Haydn had written some very fast minuets in his string quartets, but nothing like this. And as an actual minuet to be danced, you'd have a major collapse on the palace ballroom floor, I think. I hate when that happens. But the architecture of this so-called minuet is very proper. There's the standard central trio section in which the music suddenly stabilizes and the harmony becomes almost static. I think any audience could follow that. But you'll notice that each of these simple phrases is answered by the violins, lightly, darting about between the wind chords. And you heard that little hitch in the rhythm with the violins. A type of rhythmic syncopation, which we'll deal with in the finale. But we do stay comfortably in C major for this trio, including a big build-up on that same major triad and rhythm, with the instruments gradually adding in like a very quick Mannheim crescendo, which we discussed in Mozart. And this leads to a literal repeat of this crazy minuet proper, as was the custom. So why did Beethoven call this a minuet when he was actually rocking the musical world with the first ever symphonic scherzo? No one knows. It's just one of those things. In any case, here is the entire third movement, the world's fastest minuet, and I'll call it out as we go. We start in C major and rise to G major. Now, new key, new rhythm, new dynamics. All very disorienting in 1800. Now moving to D flat major. And for a moment, it's very sweet. Now it begins to rise chromatically, very mysterioso. And it's back in C major. And here's those Neapolitan harmonies. Hang on. Where's the downbeat here? In the violins. And now we'll repeat. We move into D flat major again. Now it's rising. An astounding harmonic progression. Back to C major. It's extended now those Neapolitan harmonies. Where's the downbeat in the violins? Oh, who cares? Just enjoy it. Now the trio, the woodwinds, and the whirlwind violins. At least there's some stability here, huh? Harmony, phrases. Here's that little hitch in the violins. It repeats. Violins, woodwinds, violins. Here it is again. Now on the dominant chord in the violins, we sort of fragment. The violins take over, and here's that quick Mannheim crescendo. We repeat. The violins begin again. Here's that big crescendo into C major. And the rhythm again. Now we repeat the scherzo from the top.
It's just
Oh, well,
fantastic.
this movement is a riot.
It really is. It really is. And I think Larry really enjoys it. I think one of my favorite things in music he does, and he just says, oh, who cares? Just enjoy it. And there's the way that he adds so much flair to it, which I really, really love. Um, I just want to say that the way he narrated that sketch just now, the way he talked behind the scenes, that's why I fell in love with music. I remember some of these amazing teachers I've studied with or heard in master classes, and they have the ability to play and also dictate, narrate as they're going. And I wish there was more of that. I think it's just it tells you the story as it's happening. It's like somebody who's kind of whispering in your ear as a movie's going, telling you the little details that you might have not noticed, or as Fleischer often talks about what the role of us as musicians, which isn't to make it our own. This is Beethoven's. It's Beethoven. But we are the tour guide. We're like the person who guides the audience going up the mountain or the scenery, whatever, and we just point out the little amazing things that is already there. It's already been created. It's just we're just the vessel to help guide people through. And I think this is the way to do it. I think this is such a supremely efficient way to get people to understand what's happening in the music, to really comprehend narratively and with a storytelling, not too complicated, and doesn't stop you from listening to what you're listening to, but it just guides you through it. I think it's genius.
Yeah, I love that part of Larry's narration too, where he says, "Okay, and let's listen to the movement, and I'll call it out." And
Yeah. And he
And
needs to do a whole series of that, whatever it is, just this maybe a little explanation in the beginning and just like, okay, well, let's listen to it. I'll tell you what happens as it goes. And we might pause once or twice just to say, hey, did you hear that? That was really cool. And then keep going. I remember, I think there's listening parties. I think that's what really helps musicians understand what's going on. And I really wish that would happen more. I think back in the day, perhaps, where you have a record or LP and you listen to it and you'll gather around as a group to listen to one thing. We don't do that anymore. Music is such a private listening experience. And even if
maybe
you
we
go
need to
to,
start doing more of it. And
I think
with
so.
the virtual concert halls platform and all the tools we gathered, it's
Yeah.
quite possible to start doing this because, especially, it's being led on that journey by someone like Larry Rapchak.
Yeah.
That's a really enjoyable experience. It's almost like,
Yeah.
okay, we get a racing car and we get a real professional race driver and hop in hang on to that car.
Yeah, and we
he
get to
just
watch
takes
how
it
he drives it, or what he does there. Like that turn there, see that's a really tricky one. Don't go there. You're gonna go this way. Go this racing line is way better. Or in any analogy.
And
I
by the
think
way,
this
there's a
is-
deer there. Did you see
Yes,
it?
yes, yeah. Exactly. Don't run into that one. You have a very expensive bill at the end. But I think that's it. I think that's what is going to really revolutionize the way we understand and the audience understands music.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is a story, and that story can be mysterious unless you unveil that smoke screen or just open it up, and then it becomes not mysterious but very fun story. And I mean, Larry is calling it out in simple terms, like here's the violins, but at the same time you hear what is happening in that part, and
Yeah.
that really is a huge fuel for
It's way
imagination.
better than someone pointing at the score and saying this is the Mannheim crescendo. When you experience the Mannheim crescendo, you're not going to forget that it's a Mannheim crescendo. It's always going to be associated. But if I point it out, show you how he writes it, it's not quite the same. So we need a series of Larry Rapchak just doing this as the as the music is going. And it takes a lot of skill because you always have to anticipate what's going on.
Yeah, like a
and
good driver, you need to
yeah,
anticipate those turns and all of that. And he is a fabulous writer of
yeah.
it. He's a composer himself. He's a conductor and
Mm-hmm.
he's a narrator. And he presented over 400 pre-concert lectures for none other but the Chicago Symphony. It's one of the world best
Yeah.
symphonies with huge repertoire and a great reach out. So his experience in preparation to those lectures, it takes a lot of analysis and depth to prepare something which flows like his narration, at the same time informs like his narration does, at the same time engages with all the subtle humor. It's incredible.
Yeah. I want to bring in a quote of his, basically, where he calls this scherzo, no, I shouldn't say scherzo because it wasn't written as a scherzo, but a minuet and trio as an organization of chaos with supreme intellect and logic. So what he's mentioning there is basically a creation of our world. What our world is actually very chaotic, whether it's people, whether it's nature, whether it is our interaction with nature and the universe and so many things we don't understand, whether it's from physics to geology, and yet there's an organization to it. And yet it is also not just organized in a random way, it's organized in a supreme intellect and logic. And I think that's really helps to organize what composers do, but great composers do so well.
Yeah, and that points back to one of the lectures which we observed in the previous programs, where Lawrence was talking about the width and breadth of Beethoven's interests. And this is basically dismantling bias about many composers, Beethoven and others, that to be an excellent composer, one needs to just keep writing and writing and writing.
Right.
There's so much more goes into that, and to have that ability to create music of that grand scope and so much variety. Of course, the person needs to have the baggage of interests, very well developed interests into science, and Beethoven was interested in science and in philosophies and in religions, in geography, in architecture, in just about anything and everything in there, in math. And he didn't have those interests as passing interests. He really was on top of the most advanced information he could gather at the time.
Yeah, and I really think this is quite an important part of a musician's journey. And I'm not speaking for everyone, but I think there's a tendency within the arts world to want to destroy or do away with the past, to look at tradition and to, look down on it and say, "No, we don't need this," or to conversely look in the present and ignore what's happening with technology, what's happening within our world, within the pain of people that are suffering, or to not know what else is going on within the science world, within the world of mathematics and physics, as well as in politics and in our social economic environment. And I think the way that I think is most inspiring is to look at people like Beethoven, Haydn, who was at Schumann, who was very much a part of the world, who respected culture and the traditions. And you look at people like Mendelssohn, who dug up scores of Bach and re-examined and just revolutionized our understanding of Bach for the rest of eternity, basically. And that's was really crucial. The fact that we need the past to help educate, and the people in the past are not as stupid or ignorant as we think they are. That there's a lot of this idea that people in the past, they don't know anything. We have modern science and modern technology now, so who cares about what they had to say or what they had to write? And I think it's a danger, I think, within artistics and creatives to do away with that, because it is through that's how the great stuff got written. And
Yeah, absolutely.
obviously Beethoven looked at the minuet and said, I can do better. I can try something different. But he still learned as much as he could from the way minuets were written or symphonic written. And another quote is, there's a lot of chaos happening, but it's still within the logic and the structure of the minuet and trio. He doesn't dismiss the structure of the logic of it. He understands why it works, that you're expecting A, B, A. Within the A, you're expecting so-and-so little things. And within the B is something very different, but still has some kind of character of the A section. But within this logic and structure, there is this chaos that we're completely unaware of what's going to happen next. And I think that's the brilliance of making sure we respect the past and still innovate.